Welcome back, Winers. My name is Amanda Lopez. I'm president here at Transform Consulting Group. I'm so excited that you're joining us on our Wine About Data podcast. I'm thrilled to have Alison back with us, one of our special guests, and I'll have Alison introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure, yeah. I am Alison Gerardot. I'm our Chief Impact Officer at the Community Foundation of Greater Fort Wayne in Northeast Indiana. I've been at the foundation for 8.5 years, coming on 9 years, and I've worked in the nonprofit sector, public sector my whole career, leading up to my role at the Community Foundation. I did a little bit of arts nonprofit work. I did some social work, and I worked for city government on contract doing placemaking on our riverfront redevelopment project. So yeah, a little bit of everything to kind of feed the work that I do now.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, Alison, for joining us on the podcast. I was really excited to have you come on to talk about kind of just that perspective of being a funder and like how does data show up, share a little bit about some of the projects that we've worked on to share with our listeners. So before we get into it and what we're talking about on this episode, let's talk about the wine that we are trying today. So we have a non-alcoholic Pinot Grigio, and I'm just loving the options of non-alcoholic wines because, you know, there are a lot of great choices out there that you don't have to drink wine, but you can still get that like essence of a wine.
Yep.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that's good.
That is good. Yeah. That's like a really light, it's not too sweet, but fruity.
Nope. Yeah, definitely not very, like not super sweet, but it's not dry. But fruity. There's some like fruitiness to it. Great.
I feel like this would be a great like picnic wine. You're outside or going to the beach or the lake.
That's why it's called sea glass.
I know. It is like a beach essence wine. So definitely we'll link that in the show notes if anyone wants to check out that non-alcoholic wine. It was delish.
Yeah.
But listeners, please, whatever's in your cup, pick it up. Pick up your glass of whatever and join us to listen on this episode. So, Alison, what I wanted to talk to you about today on this episode, I think our listeners could relate to, is a few years ago, the Community Foundation went on a journey to create a vision plan. And it wasn't just a plan for the Community Foundation. It was really a plan for the community. So share with the listeners, how did this idea and concept get started?
Yeah, so in 2017 is when I started working at the foundation. In 2018 is when our CEO started, Brad Little, and he took over for a longstanding CEO, David Bennett, who'd been in the role for 22 years. And part of his charge when he started was to create a new strategic plan. And so we started in late 2018, we did our first ever board and staff joint retreat.
Great.
The board and staff had never done a retreat together before. And really around Simon Sinek's why. Why are we all here? Why the Community Foundation? Why is this important to us? And really honed in on because we love our community, because we love Fort Wayne, we are all here. And Brad always likes to tell the story, you know, we may not have grown up here and we may have been brought in kicking and screaming to Fort Wayne, but you would have to drag us out of here because we love our community. You'd have to drag us out kicking and screaming because we love this community. And so
I love that.
So out of that why session started our path on this strategic planning, right? As most nonprofits and community foundations do. So we had 3 different retreats to really hone in on creating a strategic plan. And at about the second retreat was when we kind of opened everything up and we're talking about all of the community needs. It's really hard as a community foundation because unlike private foundations that have very specific charters, we as a community foundation, everything's important, and everything we could do everything.
The whole community.
It is the whole community, and everyone and everything in it is important. And so that second retreat was super overwhelming for our board, and we could just see their eyes like glaze over. Like, how are we supposed to pick one thing that we're going to do, or 3 things that we're going to do for the next 5 years? And so after that retreat, we had a presenter at that retreat talk about the Gallup Wellbeing Index and talk about data and how it can be used to inform our plans moving forward. And we had really had our eye on the Gallup Wellbeing Index, and we're pointed to the city of Santa Monica, which has a well-being office built into their city government.
Wow.
And they have a dashboard and this idea around community well-being in these broad pillars. And both of those things combined together, we really loved. And so Brad and I went with our local chamber that year on an inner city visit. They tend to do inner city visits. So we went to Louisville that year, and all the way down to Louisville and all the way back on the bus ride, Brad and I really had our computers out and, dove into everything we'd been looking at, everything that came out of all of our retreats, all of the well-being sort of indices that we were looking at, and said, what if we took the dates off of everything and just said, instead of making this in the next 5 years plan, just took the dates off of everything and said, what if we create a vision for our community? And this is what our vision for our community looks like. It's around these pillars, 5 pillars of well-being. And so that's what created our 5 pillars. So we have connected community, inspiring places, everyone's economy, lifelong learning, and healthy mind and body. And now, granted, everything within a community can sort of fit underneath those pillars.
Those are pretty broad.
Right? They're very broad. However, it allows you to sort of have a greater focus. And if you say, for the next 3 years, we just want to focus on inspiring places, and we're going to do a lot of work on inspiring places, then that might be what we do. Or, so it allows you to narrow in and create a picture for yourself, as opposed to just sort of picking random things to say that's what we're going to focus on. And so that's really how the vision plan was created.
I love that. I love just that transformation of how it evolved. And sometimes when you start off on a strategic planning journey, we don't always know what that end process is going to look like. So certainly just being open. Sometimes we facilitate a lot of strategic planning processes for clients. And sometimes people come in with already an agenda, right? Or at least what we think, these are the needs, these are the priorities, this is where we should focus on. But, often by engaging in conversations, pulling in some data, it can open up the conversation to saying, okay, here's where we want to go.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, you still got that roadmap. So now you have guardrails or guidelines of these are the things we're going to focus on. And it does bring clarity, to the organization.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the name of the plan. So share with our listeners what you call it and how did that come about?
Yeah, we call it the Let's Rise Vision Plan. We have an amazing firm in Fort Wayne called One Lucky Guitar that we work with for a lot of things, and they do brilliant work. And so we've used them for a long time. They helped us really refine this vision plan, put some structure to it, put some more language around what we mean when we say connected community. What do we mean when we say, what is that vision statement underneath each of those pillars? But then really create this, what they call a rallying cry around the whole vision plan. And we really fell into the sort of their pitch to us around Let's Rise, meaning all of us together, a rising tide brings all ships, or raises all ships, right? And so how can we have the vision plan do that for our community? How can this vision not just be one thing, that area that gets lifted up, but when one of these things gets lifted up, what other things are affected by that? And how can that help, lots of things in the community thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think just the intentionality behind the name and branding isn't always there, but especially creating a product that is going to be public facing, that you do want to be socialized, to have everybody come alongside that. It makes sense to spend some time and thoughtfulness to come up with a name and make sure it's something that's relatable. I think sometimes in nonprofit sector, we can be really jargony.
Yes.
A vision plan for Greater Fort Wayne, right? Okay, that's literally what it is, but doesn't sound very aspirational or exciting, right? Yeah. So it definitely helps. Well, you've been, several years now, in the making. Of course, it sounded like it was just before COVID.
Yes. Yeah. So we launched this. Well, we came up with it all right before COVID with the intention of releasing it, I think in March of 2020, literally. And then that all came to a screeching halt. So we didn't shelve it. We just kind of paused a little bit, and we started working on the everyone's economy pillar. And so to this story of data, we really want data to help inform how we move forward in our strategic priority areas. So in everyone's economy at that time, the priority was entrepreneurship in our community. And so we like to see if we can find a national source that might be a good model or template. So there is a great model out of the Kauffman Foundation that is what an entrepreneurial ecosystem should look like for your community. And so we did a study based on that. It's a 10-year study based solely around entrepreneurship and what that ecosystem should look like for Fort Wayne. And then have used that data from that study, as well as the sort of strategies and tactics that came out of that, to help us move forward. And we're still chugging along with that. And then we officially launched the Let's Rise Vision Plan in 2022 in conjunction with our 100th anniversary. So it was a great way to celebrate our anniversary, to do some special grant making around that time, to launch this vision plan. We also then aligned our grant making around our vision plan as well. So all of those things have sort of fed into one another over time.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of times, organizations get stuck of how do you operationalize a plan? And especially one that is more vision and aspirational and maybe isn't as tactical.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, some of your tips and next steps were looking at your grant making priorities to making sure it's aligned there.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like you're tackling each pillar area to create kind of a roadmap or a sub-plan underneath each of those.
We are. So not all of them. We learned, naive us, we thought, oh yeah, we'll just do a study for each pillar and we'll have all 5 pillars up and running within 18 months. And we have 3 still going and we still have yet to do 2. So it just takes a lot of time.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time. And if you want to really follow through with your plans and with your tactics and strategies that you set forth, and those are all 3 to 5 year plans that have lives of their own, that
lots of spinning plates going on.
Lots of spinning plates. And so we do talk about each of our pillars. We talk about the majority of our grant making. We do operational grants, and the majority of our grant making is in that healthy mind and body pillar, a lot of health and human service work. And so we don't actively do things around the vision plan necessarily, but we tie a lot of our grant making and helping nonprofits in those pillars, or in that pillar specifically. So there's ways we've tied the work into each pillar, regardless of if we have made specific grants in a pillar or if we've done a specific study in a pillar. We're still really using that language and talking about it and trying to keep all of them alive and figure out, are they still relevant too, right? Are the strategies underneath each pillar that our board decided on back in 2019, are those still relevant? We know a lot has changed in our community. We had COVID for one, right? Like
that's right.
And then just with everything happening federally and statewide, how that's affecting nonprofits and groups and people. And so with all of those changes, there is opportunity now for us. Our board has been having a retreat to really figure out what next steps are. Do we want to stick on these paths that we've been on for a few years? Do we want to change course a little bit and try and it's marrying that like structure of the vision plan and saying this path that we're going to be on, and also trying to be nimble and responsive to what the community needs, right? Because that's also really important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of big things are happening in the public sector, things that we could never have predicted, right? A pandemic, all of the change of government funding. And so I do think that is kind of the beauty and the challenge with the plan, is that you want it to be clear, but then still have flexibility.
Exactly.
Because we can't predict. So you need to be responsive, to that changing environment and kind of go back and check in on what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other ways that you've been able to, operationalize that plan, and we talked about it on another episode, is having a dashboard.
Yes.
Sounds like you were inspired looking at another community and how they had a dashboard, but that's been a great way to be able to track and monitor progress against the vision plan, right? And to know, going back to that well-being index, how well is our community doing? And is the data showing us any ways that we need to maybe like pivot or refocus or prioritize, as well as hopefully celebrate some wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that we are in year 3 of our community dashboard, we're just now getting into the good stuff, right?
Yes.
Like we've really brought it forward to our board this year, especially in this last retreat, to decide, how do we really want to use the dashboard going forward? How do we want to continue to have it tell us what the community's needs are? And in the indicators that we can also affect change, right? There are some indicators on the dashboard we feel are still really important that we can't necessarily affect all the change in.
Yes.
Per capita personal income, right, is like not something we necessarily can like affect as a community foundation, but it's an important indicator for us to be aware of as a community around what wages look like and how we can then influence that not just as the community foundation. Our Women's Fund of Greater Fort Wayne also is doing a lot of work around, wage gap and inequities in the workplace and how to really equip employers to step up and support their workforce, not just necessarily women in the workforce, but everyone in their workforce. And so yeah, how can we continue to further some of that work that's happening in our community that ultimately will affect some of those what feel like untouchable numbers. You know?
Well, and I think there's especially a balance here with it being a vision plan for the community at large and not just community foundation.
Exactly.
You can't own and do everything at the foundation, right? And so I know earlier when you talked about everyone's economy and that entrepreneurship ecosystem, you had a partner in lifting that up. And so it's not the community foundation that's going to run it and manage it. It's really finding those partners, strategic partners who are already doing that work, right?
Yes. The beauty of that plan especially was that at the same time, our chamber was doing their 5-year plan, their ACT plan, and a piece that they had been missing was entrepreneurship. And so they ended up taking our entire plan and embedding that into their plan. And so it's not just us owning that, it is the entire county owning that plan, which is really great. And I know they've really moved forward with a lot of work with CDFIs and all kinds of stuff that they, VC funds and all of that jargon that is true to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So.
Yes, exactly. No, enough just to be dangerous. But I see that as like a role and a trend happening with community foundations of being that community leader and convener. So you're helping to elevate issues and helping to elevate ideas, but bringing partners together. To solve them.
That's one of the greatest roles of a community foundation, not just a funder, but as a convener and a partner.
Yes. And I know we had the opportunity to help partner with you on the connected community pillar. And creating an ecosystem of the social sector.
That was a great study.
I know that was a great study. And we created a 5-year plan and a roadmap there. So we will definitely in the show notes link your Let's Rise vision plan, the entrepreneurial plan, the connected community plan, Collaborate for Change, which again was a good brand name title there from our wonderful partners at OLG and Link OLG and all the great work that they do. We love to work with them as well. Well, we've tackled a lot of things here, Alison, but what would be one thing that you would say maybe to a nonprofit or a foundation who's wanting to get started on a plan, whether it's a vision plan for the community or their own strategic plan? What should they do first?
I think I always love, you don't have to recreate the wheel. I think that so many of us feel like things feel very insurmountable, but there's lots of people before you that have done a lot of really great, cool work. And at least in the community foundation space, everyone's so willing to share their knowledge and their resources. And it's such a sharing community nationally and statewide in the state of Indiana because there's so many of us. And so I would say don't recreate the wheel. Find something you really like and something that really speaks to you and your foundation or your nonprofit and, have fact finding, reach out to people, right? Like people are usually willing to have a conversation about how they did the work that they did. And then really it's finding getting your board on board, right? And getting those internal partners, everybody internally on board to what you want to do and to the vision that you want to create. And then once that happens, everything tends to fall into place, right? Like once you get that buy-in from everybody internally, then it becomes a lot easier because there's one central rallying cry as you move forward.
Yes, I love that. A lot of times in our strategic planning processes, we build that into doing that, what we call like aspirational research. But it's really just the opportunity to be like, what's possible?
Yes.
It's so easy to just be stuck, not stuck, but just in your routine.
Yep.
And so a planning process is a great time to pause and look out there to see who else is doing this in this space. And maybe we could adopt it or adapt it, you know, in our community. And then definitely getting that buy-in throughout the process. So, you know, when that plan does come out, people are willing to adopt it and own it and want to implement it.
And champion it.
Yes, exactly. Well, thanks, Alison, for joining us on our Wine About Data podcast. And listeners, if you want to learn more about what we do at Transform Consulting Group, please sign up on our website for our newsletter. We only send it out once a month. You'll hear about all the great tips that we have, as well as our podcast episodes. And of course, you can listen to our podcast on all of the favorite podcast apps, whether it's Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Well, Alison, again, thank you for joining us today. Cheers to you and the great work doing in Northeast Indiana.
Cheers.
Cheers to our listeners.